Well, this whole month we're marking 25 years as a church. We're at a pivot in our history. Allow me to say you're not here by accident. You're here because God drew you here, even though you may have been drugged by your heels. You're here because the Lord actually placed you here. I speak from experience because I never wanted to come to church, much less be a pastor, but I'm 64 now. I've been doing this for almost 40 years. So the Lord loves us, and He's got a vision for our lives. So we're going to talk about our God-given vision this morning. And Scripture says where there is no prophetic vision, people cast off restraint. What that means is we tend to live aimlessly and carelessly. So God has a vision. Okay, God has a vision for us as a church family. We're going to start there this morning. As we talk about vision, 2 weeks ago we looked at mission. Last week we had a prophetic picture of clarity from Prophet Jim LaFoon, in my estimation, the world's finest. But Jesus has a vision for his church, his spiritual family. He said, I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. And so Jesus had a vision of a church that would be given the gates to society, and through which, when we enter, we would take the gospel or the good news as the answer for some of the bad news that's happening. All right. Now, 2 weeks ago, we looked at mission. We looked at how mission is the why for any organization, entity, or church. And we all have a common mission. Every church on the planet has the same mission, and that is to go and make disciples. That is to reach people far from God and bring them near to God, make them followers of God. Our mission is to know God, to follow God, to discover our purpose, discover our gifts, as we'll look at today, and they go together, and we help others to do the same. Because at the end of the day, our mission is to reach people. This life is not all that there is. So that's the why. But here's what vision is. Vision gives us the meat to the bones. Vision gives us the what, the where, and to some extent, the who. And God has a vision for this church family, locally, nationally, and globally. So we review years of our history, prophetic words, leadings, what God has been doing in us. And we know now through prophetic destiny, and that's why you have a fivefold office of a prophet come in, that the first 25 years was foundation. The next 25 years is multiplication. And so we're called primarily, our vision is to make disciples, to train leaders, and plant churches. And when we say plant churches, that includes also helping churches, established churches who need strength and reinforcement, as well as starting them. And God's given us a where. He says not only in Hawaii, but it'll be in the South Pacific, it'll be in Asia and the West Coast of North America. So the Lord is stretching us beyond our comfort zone. He says the reason you exist, Pearlside, is not to be a clubhouse. It's not to be a luxury liner. You're an aircraft carrier from which you send out vessels that are trained to make a difference not only locally but nationally and globally. So if you're here, here's what I want to say. Your vision, the vision for your life, because God has one, is going to align with the vision of this house. Now, when Prophet LaFoon came last week, he re-emphasized something we've known in part for the last 10 years. Well, actually, for the last 25 years. When my wife Faye and I started this church with what I call the Dirty 30 crew of people, God surprised us and gave us a lot of young people that were really rough cut. Nanakuli, Waianae, Kalihi, Waipahu, people like that, okay? We didn't have people coming from Kahala. We didn't have people like that coming from, some of the calmer places. So what was really odd is and then we were located way up on the hill in Pearl City Heights. And I would ask some of the kids, how in the world are you finding us? Because part of my mindset was, why don't you go find some other churches? They're easier. They're at ground level. You don't have to try hard to locate us. Well, the Lord was thumbprinting our DNA. He says, I've called you to be a church that majors in reaching young people. And so I had to step back and go, well, Why are we reaching all these rough-cut young people? I am a good-looking Japanese guy, okay, pretty normal. I have a good-looking Japanese wife and 3 Japanese girls. Why are we drawing all of these rough-cut kids? I mean, and you know the story. If you're here and you've never been here before, I've had to break up gang fights. I've had to separate police officers from students. We had ushers as police officers, as ushers, frisking for weapons in the first year of the church. And it was wild. It was too wild. And I was like, enough already. Go someplace else. But then the Lord spoke to me and said, no, this is your assignment. This is your mission. And should you choose to accept it, I want to do some special things here. 25 of these years later, we're still doing it. And by the way, since you're here, you're going to be part of the next 25 years. And here's what Prophet Laffoon said. In the first 25 years, you started with teenagers and you started with people that were basically young adults. Okay, the latent teens, mid-teens, late teens, young adults. But he says the next 25, it's going to drop. The harvest will be at the pre-adolescent, adolescent stage. We're talking 11 years old. Okay, and then he says the trigger to your destiny and your vision is going to be to have a heart for people in middle school. Now, I'm 64 years young. Generally speaking, that's not the kind of direction you're comfortable with, except if it's God's idea. Now, as you're looking at me, I'm looking right back at you. How many of you remember when you were in middle school? How many of you don't want to remember when you were in middle school, right? I mean, that was I was a middle school teacher. Pastor Paris was my middle school student, okay? I coached middle school basketball. I mean, that's an interesting age of incredible promise of formation for the future. And so as I stand here, I want to say that we're headed for a younger future. We're headed for an adventurous future together. Now here's why. Now God has a vision for every church family, but God has a related vision for us individually. God has a related vision for us individually. The great prophet Jeremiah, speaking to the people of God who were terribly backslidden, had terribly drifted, and they had let the blessings of God from a previous generation get to their heads. It affected their morals. Jeremiah was a weeping prophet. He was a compassionate man, but he was given the direction from the Lord to appeal to the people of God with stuff they didn't want to hear. And it was getting to Jeremiah. He says, man, I just am so impacted with having to tell bad things to my people when I love them. But it was so bad, God told him, you don't even pray for my people anymore. They're so derelict. But he said, I'm going to give you a hope. I'm going to give you a glimmer of the future because it's not always going to be this way. And here's this is the context for what he writes in a familiar passage in Jeremiah 29. He says, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for welfare and not for evil, to give you a hope, a future and a hope. That's what he has for all of us, not only as a people corporately, but all of us individually. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will hear you. You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all of your heart. Now, all of us together individually make up God's family corporately. We are the church. Okay, the building's not the church. People of God are the church. That word literally means the called out ones. God's called all of you out to be here. And God's joined this church to you. Think about that. A lot of us think, I have chosen to be here. I determine where I go. Here's what we need to know, what Scripture teaches. God places the solitary in families in the book of Psalms. He ordains what spiritual family you'll be in. That's why when I step back, okay, and I look at all the churches, like I was spending some time with Pastor Mike Kai, who's got a church larger than ours, blowing up over there in Spot. Mike and I are very good friends. He considers me a mentor. And some people have left our church for his church. And so the other day I said, Mike, you know, we have 6 locations, not 5. You're our 6th location. So we were just laughing about this because I think there's about 200 our people that you have. I think we have about 10 of yours. I said, it's not a fair exchange. But here's why this feels okay. God determines where people go. And you're here because you want to be here. At least I think so. You're here not by accident. You're here because God put you here. because you're going to be a part of the corporate vision. And allow me to say that your individual personal vision is somehow going to fit into the South Pacific, the West Coast, Asia, globally, internationally. It's going to affect young people. Here's the understanding every church leader will tell you about the importance of reaching the next generation. Number one, and we're going to talk about this in our next series, the disciples. I want you to hear this very clearly. The disciples were not old men or cool-looking men in their 20s and 30s. Jesus' disciples were aged 15 to 18 years old when they were recruited. Only one was an older guy, and that was Peter. The rest of them were teenagers. Queen Esther, you know that movie? That Esther, for such a time as this, she became queen at age 14. So when the Lord says you're going to reach young people, it's just part of history. We're going to break this open next month in our Legacy series. But all of us need to understand that if we will love and embrace the next generation of young people, if we will take seriously this interesting middle school, pre-adolescent era, here's what studies show. If you will reach the young, you will reach the middle age, and you reach the elderly. Not so if you aim for the old. Because there's something about God's order when you study Scripture. World changers were recruited when they were very young. Jesus recruited young. He recruited 15 to 18-year-old people. Go Google it. Nowadays you go, Pastor, that's a little out there, man. So Jesus started his church with the same people we started with. And that was like a crew. They didn't like each other. Jesus had to mold them into a team. At least we like each other. That was a little nervous laughter. Okay, but there's an increase coming. Now, so here's how we find our vision. All of us have a passion. In fact, we have it in picture form. So every one of us here, you have a God-given passion, a burning desire for something, and an affinity for something. You also have a set of God-given gifts and abilities. You may not be clear about them, but you have them. And part of the journey about being part of our spiritual families, we're going to help you discover what that is if you're not sure about what that is. Okay? And God has given in your heart a desire to meet the needs of others, because God has made us in his image. And God is all about loving others. So the sweet spot in the middle where three circles converge, passion, gifts and abilities, and the needs of others, that's where your personal vision will be discovered. A personal vision that fits into the corporate vision of the house, the church vision. A lot of people want to find a vision, and they end up building their own kingdom because they think the spiritual family's vision and the personal vision is separate. Some people actually think the church should serve my vision. Actually, once we come to the Lord, God puts his people into spiritual families, and they only will find their vision and the reason they're on the planet in the context of a church vision, because he puts everybody into a spiritual family. So it's not separate. It's in context. Our guest spot today is Derek Lowe. And so I'm going to invite Derek to come on up here. Derek is considered Mr. Basketball. He's the locally bred, probably the quintessential best locally bred basketball player to come out of Hawaii. So let's welcome Derek. Derek's been part of our Father's Day service with his dad, who was in our earlier service back in 2016. Many of you, some of you were here. Remember, we set up a basket. We had basketballs. We had a contest. I sank my free throw, and things like that were happening. Okay, I was tempted to do it again, but I just thought, well, we'll just be more civilized today. He grew up in Kukui Gardens, product of a broken family, right across Mayor Heights housing. If you read surveys, he was a statistic on the way to a bad life. But a loving father, raised with Christian values, raised him and somehow got him into Iolani School. At Iolani, he became a stellar basketball player, all-state, I believe, 4 years. Incredible. That got him a scholarship to Washington State University. He was an All-American candidate. He became a John Wooden Award finalist. And this is Derek back then in a game against North Carolina. Was this the NCAAs?
Yes.
Okay, this is the NCAA tournament. Okay, so there's a light-skinned dude against a dark-skinned dude right there. And that's the Tar Heels. Well, he went on to play for Team USA and 10 years playing in the international professional arena that took him throughout the world. Quite a story. Local boy, made good. But we had a conversation one day where you were still playing. I said, Derek, what's going to happen after basketball? What does God want to do with basketball? Okay, and let's throw that 3-circle diagram back up there, guys. All right. We were looking at this. You'd seen this. And I said, any idea? And then share with all of us what you shared.
Okay. Yeah. So I have to admit that same question always used to come up, like from when we were small kid time, teachers or coaches, going through college, academic advisors. When I went to all these camps and combines and, for NBA Summer League and stuff, we always have people coming in and talking to us and always saying, like, you guys always need to have something to fall back on because, the professional sports is such a tiny window for you to perform at that level that you always need something to fall back on. And, at that time, I'm pretty sure I could play forever. And that was my mindset, right? So like, after so many years of playing professional, body starts to feel it a little bit. So it kind of starts to become a reality. Okay, maybe I can't play forever. But so the question, kept coming up. What am I going to do after I'm done playing? What can I do? And I couldn't really think of much. I tried to think of all these different things. For instance, like, maybe I can do real estate like Artie Wilson. But so I looked at the book. It was like this thick, and I started to read it, because you got to take a test. And I read chapters 1 through 4. Okay, everything's good. Started chapter 5, and all of a sudden, I forgot 1 through 4. And so, like, I had to do, like, a couple of times. So I did, okay, I read 1 through 4 again. But every time I got to chapter 5, forgot everything. And so I was like, hey, maybe this is not for me. And then try to think of other stuff. And, the whole time, I was trying to look outside and stuff that wasn't really me when the answer was kind of clear, And which brings us to when I asked you when we were in your office, I was like, what can I fall back on? Like, what's my purpose outside of basketball? And then you showed me this formula, and then it kind of like became super clear, and that's how I came up with the
passion basketball, gift basketball, and then the opportunity to serve the community has produced what we now see. Let's throw up the logo and the name. What is Proformance?
Proformance is my basketball, like I just call it an academy. So like we have clinics and trainings during the weekday, private trainings, and then we have travel teams that we take all over, playing tournaments and go to the mainland and stuff like that. But so.
How did you come up with the name?
So the name, it's a play on words. So it's Proformance Hawaii. And, I remember one service, I think I was sitting somewhere in the middle right over here. And I told him this, so it's okay now, but I don't remember what he was talking about. I don't remember the
They
message.
don't remember either.
Yeah. So like, but I do remember. For some reason, he was emphasizing you got to read, you got to be prayerful, and you got to obey. And I was sitting there in my seat, and I was trying to take notes. Otherwise I'm not going to pay attention. So I was like trying to take notes, and I was trying to find a way that I can remember this. And I was messing around with acronyms, and like I stumbled like I was like ORP, ROP, but then none of them seemed to work. So then I stumbled on Pro, and I was like, okay, yeah, I can remember this. It's pretty easy. And so that's how I got the first part, the Pro. And then when it came time to think of what I'm going to call my basketball thing, like I didn't really think about it too hard, and it almost seemed like it just came easily. I was like, performance. I just said it,
Yeah.
and then it kind of just stuck, and it was easy, and I liked it. So that's how I came upon the name.
How about that? God kind of speaks to you in church. So when he wrote it on the board, I went, performance. I went, that is so awesome. Wow. Now, here's some shots. I mean, obviously, there's tons of things because there's the team side, the clinic side, the teaching side. This is some of what Derek does. He uses a variety of locations, not only here, but he does things also outside our country. It's grown that way and outside our state. So that's, oh, look at that, man, left hand, right hand. That's, and then we've got this coming up, this next shot. Explain this, because this is, see, when my grandson is in his clinic, and obviously when I go there, all I see is young people. I see rough cut young people. I see young people. I see families. And I'm thinking to myself, golly, it's the bullseye of our church. And I thought about all the kids we've worked with over the years. And I thought the structure that Proformance provides, because many of them had athletic ability, could have really redirected their lives at an even younger age. And I sat there and went, Proformance is performing the vision of our church. But tell us about that. That's a little strange to me. What is that?
Oh, it's just I come across a lot of kids. Those are a lot of our friends actually, and our friends' kids, and we're all part of a group, and we train all these kids. We train, like you said, we're blessed to be able to go outer island, train different players there, go Tahiti, train national teams over there, and so forth. But this is just a collection of kids who we know very well, who we've had a hand in their life and their development as players. And as you can see, they did pretty well. And that's just what it's about. It's about trying to take things that I've learned and have been taught ever since I was their age, and kind of just trying to figure out ways to kind of share it with them and give it back to them so that they can experience some of the things I was able to experience. So yeah, this is just one of the products that they did.
Interesting. Pro basketball took you through many countries of the world, because part of our prophetic word is this is a sending center to the nations. From a local church to a center that goes beyond, not even beyond our country, but obviously Tahiti. But God's prepared you for this. Where have you lived because of your professional career?
So chronologically, like I went to Australia, France, Lithuania, Israel, 3 years in Ukraine, Turkey, Romania, and then 2 years in Lithuania. 2 more years in Lithuania.
Where was the favorite for you?
Favorite, I would have to say Ukraine.
Okay. Did you guys get that? This is a kid who grew up by Marrites housing, whose gifts took him to the world. Boggles my mind. So this dream can be put into the kids you're teaching now, right?
Yep, that's my main vision. Because I was telling Pastor Norm, like, when I was trying to think whether or not to do this whole basketball thing, I came off the question like, there's already clinics and stuff. There's already trainers or whatever. And I was like, I could do one of two things. I could either, not do anything and just kind of, all the wonderful coaches that I came across, I could keep that to myself, keep whatever I know just in here and just stay in my comfort zone and not have to talk to anybody or share. Or I can kind of step out of my comfort zone a little bit and really share whatever I know and everything that I was taught and just try to give these kids an opportunity to experience, some of the cool things that I was able to experience.
You have 5 pillar values. We were in small group together, obviously, and then you began to share with the group about these 5 values that now young people are receiving through Proformance. What are they?
So a little backstory on those pillars. When I was at Washington State, my coaches at the time, Dick Bennett and Tony Bennett, they had these pillars that they instilled in us from the very beginning. It was humility, passion, unity, servanthood, and thankfulness. And if you really look at our team back then, if you look at the Pac-10 and the competition that we played and the players that were playing at that time, we were just, honestly, we were just a bunch of under the radar white guys, we're playing against NBA
caliber
superstars.
Yeah.
And,
right.
But because we had this foundation, because everyone bought into it, we all had something to play for. Mm-hmm. And I think it made our level of play just go up and up. And, we found ourselves able to compete against all these guys. But yeah, I think that just kind of shows you if you have a solid foundation, if you have values, whether it's in a team, whether it's in a business, or even your house, you don't have a solid foundation, something can come and just sweep it away, can fall or whatnot. But I think that just firsthand showed me the power and importance of having a solid foundation. And it just means a lot more that I get to share that with all of my teams.
One more time, the values were?
Humility, passion, unity, servanthood, and thankfulness.
That's beautiful. Oh, that's beautiful. Well, obviously, Micah, he's here. He's hearing you today, and he's in your clinic, and you've worked with him. And thank you for doing this, because when I visit what Derek does, I go, wow. This is where you can reach young people, and many of them are rough cut. They come from disadvantaged families or troubled homes. And this gives a structure for serving the community with your passions and gifts that goes beyond profit for yourself. He could be still playing today, but Derek Lowe decided that he would say no to another contract and big money to serve the community. And every season of our lives, God will He'll pivot our vision to make it clearer and to take our lives to the next level, but not just us. We take others along with us. Derek, I want to say thank you. Proformance, right there, huh? Right about there. That means the people seated right there might be hearing God right now. Derek Lowe, thank you. How do we possess vision? Okay, we're going to close with this. Earnest prayer and obedience. It's not just prayer. It's earnest prayer and obedience is the key to the possession of our vision. The prophet Habakkuk, troubled by the backsliding of the people of God in Old Testament days, they had been blessed so much. He saw the drift. The problem was Habakkuk was living at a time that God's patience was still being demonstrated. And his appeal to God is, when are you going to discipline those who followed you, who have been blessed so much by you, because the immorality, the arrogance, the disobedience was massive. And the Lord said, it's coming. It's coming. And until it comes, you've got to live by faith and you've got to trust me. But beyond that, Habakkuk, is going to be a vision of promise, because I'm not a God who leaves a people destitute. And it's with that background in mind, he writes here in chapter 2, I will take my stand at my watchpost and station myself on the tower and look out to see what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint. The righteous shall live by his faith. And the Lord answered me, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so he may run who reads it. For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end. It will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. This week we are entering a week of fasting and prayer. 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And you're going to hear about it at the end today. We are at a pivot. And as we enter the next 25 years, I don't know about you, but we want clarity. We want illumination and revelation, not only corporately, but individually. Derek Lowe, right about there, heard. I remember when he was writing the vision on a board in my office, and just to see him doing it now is just a gratifying feeling. And he's working with all these young people, and I see their families all in the bleachers, and I go, this is the way it works. We're here to serve those beyond ourselves. Well, Todd Fujimori, and I want to introduce you to Todd here on picture. He's actually a guest spot at one of our other locations. Also an Iolani graduate. By the way, there's just a lot of, some people are tired of Farrington and Kalihi, and I'm not, but there's a revival among Iolani families right now happening. So God's blowing. How many of you come from Iolani? Okay, in this church. Nobody. Okay, so here. But anyway, the church's colors are changing. How many of you noticed the paint job? Nobody noticed the paint job as you were coming in? Okay. All right. We're not finished yet. Okay. Stuff's coming. This is Todd. He's played for Iolani, coached at Iolani, but here's what you need to know. He's graduated from Iolani. He's been an educator for years. Now, in the vision of our church, we're called to reach educators, students, athletes, law enforcement, government leaders, military. This is the who. This is the target. Not that we'll ignore everybody else, but God says your special DNA is going to be these kinds of people. And he spent 27 years in the DOE. 8 years as a vice principal, 8 years as a principal, 8 years as a principal at Makakilo Elementary School, where he is respected, honored. And he's pretty much saying, I'm just going to kind of write it out till I finish. He's got it made. Todd Fujimura's got it made. But then last year at Seek Week, he heard the Lord speak to him about other things, that you're not done. You're just not going to phone it in. And it was there, as we reviewed the prophetic words that came over our church previously, it was just clarified about middle school. He was led, at first against his will, but with his wife whispering in his ear, to apply for the principalship of the new East Kapolei Middle School that's being erected, state-of-the-art technology, fully air-conditioned with a 1,000-seat cafeteria. Elementary school principals don't generally get selected for middle school positions. He threw his name in the ring, led by God out of prayer and fasting. And not too long ago, he was notified he was selected out of many, many candidates. Strategically, his wife said, honey, did you notice? Middle school revival. You were chosen to be the middle school principal and the envy of most professional people's desires. And so plans are being made to move our Kapolei congregation from the present middle school, which has been wonderful for us, but with no AC in Kapolei. How many of you know we would be sweaty and stink with no AC right now in this place? And so pray with us as we want to believe that that which is probable will become fulfilled September of 2020. Why am I saying this? Todd has fresh excitement, fresh vision, fresh passion, and fresh joy, knowing that you're just not phoning in the rest of your life. you're climbing to the next level of your vision, which is exactly what God has for you and for me. I was telling our earlier service, which is the oldest service of our 14 services, I said, gang, we could just phone it in right now. You know, the goal in life for people in Hawaii is not to retire and go Vegas. That's a dog's life. God's put us on this planet to be productive and obedient, fulfilling his mission and vision till we die. And one day, all of us, we're going to stand before the Lord to give account for the gifts and abilities, the passion that we have, and how we've used that to serve others in the context of our community, the world, and our house. It's he who reigns. It's he who lives. And it's he who is working in your life and my life as we allow him to.